Hello, my name is John Henry Sheridan and welcome to another book review video. Today is kind of a big one in that I've been reading it for a long time, and that is Mohandas K. Gandhi Autobiography, The Story of My Experiments with Truth. And notice I said Mohandas. Most people call him Mahatma. Mahatma means great soul. Mohandas is his name. And he mentions, of course, the Mahatma title that was given to him, and he doesn't like it. He said, as much as it is an honor, sometimes causes him pain. Of course, I'm talking as if he's alive. So, Mahatma Gandhi, Mohandas K. Gandhi. I'll explain my brief connection to him before I talk about the book. Growing up in America, kids hear of Mother Teresa, Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr. They kind of get lumped together as these like saintly people of the relatively recent history. And so, I was aware of him in that way. And then in 2009, I did a study abroad to India. So for years, I was curious about India. That's another story. But when I was there, there was just a lot of recognition of Gandhi's greatness. And he doesn't like the term greatness or the praise, but I understand why others would put it on him. There were villages that were designed and named after Gandhi, like Gandhigram villages in more than one part of India, where they took his ideals and tried to put them into action. There's a Gandhi museum. I believe he appeared on some of the money notes. Can't be positive, I think. So he's like a national hero. I would say for good reason. Okay, and then came back, and that same year, 2009, in Landmark Education, this like spiritual growth class I took, Gandhi came up and they showed a clip from his film and of like the power of one person to, affect change in the world. And in this case, it was standing up against Britain with a nonviolent philosophy and really empowering people. And then as I became, also the same year, I became a Buddhist, SGI, Nichiren Buddhist, chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and began to study that philosophy and literature. And throughout the next decade plus, I would encounter Gandhi's name a lot in reference to Daisaku Ikeda, the third president of the Soka Gakkai, and how they had the similar mission of empowering ordinary people and for aiming towards global peace, but on really active, like politically, socially engaged way, not in a quiet, sit in the room and meditate way. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but these guys were actively evoking, enacting peace through social engagement. Okay, so then COVID hit, right, 2020, and I thought, let me I started embarking on my autobiography process and have more time, and I thought, let me read some autobiographies that would help me to know how to write my own. So that involved a lot of rock star bios, but it also involves bios of spiritual figures and maybe sometimes thought leaders. More like rock star and spiritual is kind of what I'm attracted to. So I got Gandhi's biography. I thought it'd be a good idea to read it. So that was a long introduction, and now Kai is curious what his face looks like on the camera this morning. And who do you think looks more cute? I know what you're thinking. Yeah, I know where your vote went. Probably not to me. Okay, so I started reading this. I believe it was spring 2020. It might have been 2021, but a couple years ago. And there's pros and cons. So I'll talk to you about the pros. I'll tell you a little bit about the book. It was written between 1925 and 1929, basically as a series, serialized in a publication, as a way to create content, and also because people were asking Gandhi to explain how he did what he did, and he was, very famous at that time for the non-violent political movements and stuff like that. So he said, okay, I'll explain how I did it. So his motivation from the beginning was not this, to create this very entertaining, self-praising work, right? So you don't get much entertainment in it. You don't get much self-praise. You get self-analysis. Occasionally he acknowledges himself for what he did, but it's not this egotistic thing. But when it does pop up, he explains why it popped up, and he very quick to acknowledge his faults, which is really great for to read someone's story and they explain their weaknesses. That's super important, I think. And then when he tells you his victories, he doesn't do it in a way that's like glamorizing at all. Very humble, and it doesn't. When I read it, if I didn't know about him, I wouldn't think he was that extraordinary. Actually, that's how he writes it. But it's from other people's perspective, we could see, wow, this guy is incredible what he did. So, okay, so some of the pros is that it's a deep look into the mind and heart of a extraordinary and a historically significant human being, spiritually significant, you could say. He talks about his lineage to start off, which for me was interesting because a lot of autobiographies I've read, it's, they talk about when they were born and when their parents, maybe a little about the grandparents, but he actually explains the Gandhi line and what kind of caste he's from and what kind of jobs his ancestors had a little bit. So that's pretty cool. It's a really expansive view of who he is, And then clearly shares his own faults, like I said. It's probably a great book for referencing, if you actually are in a movement of some sort, and for study how peace movements can be, or in law, there's a lot of lawyer stuff in there. And also just fascinating to see how ordinary of a human being he was, his early marriage, basically childhood marriage, and what their relationship was like, him and his wife. So it's fascinating, okay? Now for some of the cons. And I say cons as in why you may or may not want to read it as a current person in the modern world with time constraints and preferences and stuff like that. It's, for one, it's very dry, so it's not entertaining. In the beginning, it is a little bit because it's more human. There's the politics and the law doesn't get involved yet, so it's kind of not hard to read. It's kind of interesting. It is very interesting, but it's kind of compelling. But as it goes on, definitely by halfway through, it was not compelling at all as a reader, because it just wasn't very exciting, and because I couldn't picture what was going on. I didn't really understand the context, cultural context, even though I'd been to India and whatever. I didn't know what problems he was talking about because there were so many problems that he was addressing. I couldn't really get a grasp on it all. And then especially gets later to the book with the Congress of India, there's so many names and so many happenings and grievances, and I have no idea what's going on really, unless I knew about that stuff. For people who were there or know Indian history well, or British history in India, it would probably be super fascinating or helpful. But if you don't know about it, there's a lot of words, a lot of names that just feel like too much to keep track of. So without the juicy, like, you know, the tastes, flavors, smells, visual, it's not very descriptive that way. It's more in the mind stuff. And these parties arguing, and it was hard to read to the end, for sure. Very hard to read to the end, and I decided to do it. So it took me like 4 years, 3 or 4 years. Unknown, and I like to read, and I like spiritual books, but this is, I don't know. It was not easy. Unknown words, unknown situations, too many names, dry. So it's not a complaint. He didn't write it to be exciting. He didn't write it as entertainment. He didn't write it with me in mind, right? So I don't think. So his purposes of writing it to record his experiments with truth. He didn't really even want to write his own story, except that seemed like the best way for him to describe his experiments with truth, because his whole life was dedicated to that. My autobiography is called Seeking My Truth, so reading his was pretty important for me, so I could see where I want to go, what could be too boring for people, how much I want to be creative about keeping things interesting. So just briefly, I want to mention Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda.
Even I think he's a master. There's this guy in here. His name is
Lahiri,
and he's
Mahasaya.
Very, very, very crazy.
Very awesomely amazing dude.
Yeah.
So
just
I'm not
by looking at the picture, you literally just become happy.
Yeah, this is epic. So I'm not going to get into it, but I just want to say, like, this was written for a different purpose, spiritual, and kind of entertainment. I don't know, maybe just different. Gandhi was a lawyer, and he was a yogi and I guess kind of a monk and then a teacher. And his job was to make yoga interesting for the West. So I guess their purposes were very different. Anyway, this was written about 20 years after Gandhi's autobiography, and much, much easier to read. What does that mean? I don't know, but I just know I'm reading both at the same time, so I just noticed that, right? Anyway, that book review will come when that's done, for sure. So Mohandas Gandhi, his autobiography, can I recommend it to readers? I have no idea. If you really want to learn about Gandhi, it's a great way to do it. I imagine watching the movie might be a better option if you don't want to dedicate a long time to it. The chapters are short, which is nice. You can read a chapter in 5 minutes, but it is a little bit dense to get through the whole thing. Okay. Thank you, Gandhi, for everything you've done. And that's all for now. And thank you for sitting on my lap. Okay, guys, keep reading.